when we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige. You're going to see that that was all game, that that was all an illusion. The only thing that's going to matter is the impact you had on other people's lives.
We are all on a separate journey. But the beautiful thing about our life here on this earth is at my funeral, they ain't going to talk about my success. They're going to talk about who Nick was and how Nick lived and how Nick loved and encouraged.
Success is incredibly important, but even more important than success, it's having an impact. It's knowing you haven't walked the planet in vain. It's knowing that because you've been here, you've blessed lives, you've developed people, and you have made the world a better place.
The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart.
Life is a mirror, and life gives us not what we want. Life gives us who we are. When you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice.
Have you ever stopped to wonder about the soul behind the spotlight? The truth behind the headlines? Beneath every glamorous facade lies a story waiting to be told. A journey full of triumphs, struggles, heartaches, and victories. Welcome to People, the groundbreaking new series here on the Alpha Warrior Show. Tonight, we're setting politics aside. No hidden agendas, no filters, just pure, raw humanity. In a world that constantly tries to categorize us, it's easy to forget what binds us together. Our shared experiences, our laughter, our tears, and the authentic moments that define who we truly are. Each week, we're going to explore the powerful, emotional, and beautiful imperfect lives of people who inspire us, captivate us, and remind us that we're all in this incredibly messy and extraordinary journey together. We'll laugh, we'll reflect, and we'll dive deep into the stories that often go untold, unapologetically, real, and deeply personal. Get ready to meet the heart behind the headlines, the reality behind the reputation, the persona behind the person, the grit that makes these amazing people tick. This is People, real stories, real connections, real life. And when we come back from this commercial, it's showtime, and I hope you enjoy.
Big Pharma is officially on notice.
People drinking methylene blue and stuff like that.
Yeah, methylene blue, which was a fabric dye.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a textile dye. And now they find out it has profound effects on your mitochondria.
Yep.
Yeah.
This stuff works, man.
Do you know about methylene blue? Originally synthesized over 100 years ago, we are just finding out about its benefit as a supplement with its ability to help oxygenate the blood and amplify our mitochondria. People all around the world are using methylene blue to accelerate their brain power and support their energy levels. Conscious Strength. Methylene blue is pure USP grade, aqueous solution. Click the link to learn more and shop Conscious Strength now.
Van Man's taking down big toothpaste with all-natural oral care. Just pure, effective ingredients for a healthier smile. The Van never stops. Powered by hydroxyapatite, nature's secret weapon loaded with minerals like eggshells and bone. Two of the best forms of calcium to remineralize teeth and build strong bone tissue. Van Man's tooth powder combined with pulling oils and peppermint aloe mouth rinse is truly the ultimate fluoride-free dental hygiene bundle that saves you 25% off the individual prices. Head over to badlandsmedia.tv/vanman. That's badlandsmedia.tv/vanman to hop in the van for the ultimate way to care for your teeth naturally. That's badlandsmedia.tv/vanman. Again, that's badlandsmedia.tv/vanman. All right, ladies and gentlemen, remember, those are the people that support this show. So go down in the description, support the people that make this possible, and you will find the links to my guest tonight. Tonight's guest is going to be pretty awesome. You guys know I always get excited when I get to talk to somebody who wore that piece of metal on their chest and made sacrifices that most people won't understand. But what's even more awesome is, as we get to the back half of this conversation, his work didn't stop with his career. And I'm talking about buddy Jason, 3D Response Systems. He continued because there's something that all parents fear when it comes to schools and how are our kids protected. And he came up with a solution that is amazing, folks, and you're going to want to hear it. But before we do that, let's learn about him, hear his story. Jason, brother, we finally made this connection. I got you here. How you doing, man?
It's a really hot, it feels like 90 degrees in Minnesota, which is rare.
You know what? That's correct. I'm in Southern California. I should be hotter than you, and we actually got nice weather out here right now, man.
No, it's ugly outside today.
It is. Well, let's start here. And I kind of told you before we went hot, you know, the direction of how I kind of run the show and let the audience know about you. You were law enforcement, but there was a Jason before law enforcement. What was kind of life like for you growing up? You know, from a young age, did you know that you wanted to go into law enforcement? Kind of paint the story for us.
No, my dad was in the Navy. My grandfather was World War II. My great grandfather was World War I, both in the Army. So I was kind of brought up in that lifestyle, and big into sports. Grew up playing hockey since I could walk. Yeah, that's what Minnesota boys do up here. Played football, baseball up until high school year, and was really into sports. Never really thought about what I wanted to do. And then, you know, back then you almost felt like you had to go to college. So I went up to the University of Minnesota Duluth, and my counselor said, you know, what do you enjoy to do? And I said, well, I like to hunt and fish and play hockey. He said, okay, well, what do you want to do that will make money? And I said, hunt, fish, or play hockey. So he said, well, how about wildlife management? You know, I said, sure, why not? So it involved a lot of math and a lot of chemistry. And I think after my first quarter, my GPA was like, it was like Animal House. I was like a 0.03. It was not my thing. And I made the mistake. I was put on academic probation and I had to take a test. And this is full transparency, but I found the dorkiest kid I could. And I sat next to him and I cheated my ass off. And I tested into like advanced trigonometry. I thought this was, if I don't pass this, I'm not going to be able to stay here. Well, I put myself in this, I'm in this first day in advanced trigonometry, looking around going, look at these dorks in here. What am I doing? So I went back to my advisor, and at the time too, I walked on to the University of Minnesota hockey team, and I made their practice squad. So I was kind of doing the hockey thing too. Never got to play a game, but you know, I eventually transferred over to junior league. That was just goon league. But anyway, my advisor says, well, what about criminology? I said, okay. So I take that class, and we had to do a ride along. And in my ride along, I actually ended up in a foot chase with the sergeant I was riding with and tackled this guy. And I got done with that going, you get paid for this shit? Like, this is awesome. And switched my major, and the rest was history. Don't cheat on tests, boys and girls.
Eventually you're gonna have to figure it out. You know, I remember, you know, my first ride along, you know, before I saw the action stuff, you know, with the agency I ended up ultimately applying with. I remember in the, you know, the administration of justice courses, they make you do a ride along, right? So like, you know, so you can do paper on it. And I went with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and I went out, and I remember thinking, man, all you do is drive around. Like, and then finally, you know, the day ends up with, there was actually a terrible CPS call. It was one of the bad ones. I won't paint the picture for the audience, but I came out of that house kind of like checking myself to make sure I didn't have roaches on me. Like, that's the kind of infestation that it was very sad. I remember that was heartbreaking, but that was my first one, man. And then obviously the fun ones did come later. So then what happens? When do you fill out the application, and how does that unfold?
So I did an internship with my hometown, and back then, this is 1994. There's 500 applicants for one spot, and I'm a 21-year-old kid. Like I'm sitting across from 10-year Minneapolis cops that want to come down to the suburbs, and I'm going, I don't have a shot in hell at this. Somehow I got selected. I think my internship actually did it, and went in law enforcement, did my field training, which was probably the most stressful 16 weeks of my life. People don't realize how hard that is mentally. You are judged on everything you do. And I remember my first day without my field training officer in there. I put my bag in the front passenger seat. And I'm like, this is my effing squad now. And like that was a good moment in my life. But yeah, and then worked patrol for 6-7 years, mostly dog shift. Get to see a lot on nights. That was fun. I do miss the in progress stuff. God, those were fun. You also see a lot of crap like you just said, where there's a couple calls where I turned as white as a ghost and threw up outside just from the smell of scenes. Then I went into the school as a school resource officer. I got promoted to sergeant, and then they sent me up to the drug task force, and I worked undercover narcotics. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. We would hit, I would say, a door a day.
Did you have a big beard?
Oh yeah, I didn't look anything. I looked like a piece of shit. But and then I was clean cut some of the time, so they'd use me to pose like as a doctor. So I'm like an ER doc, and I'm buying cocaine from a guy. Like, okay. I can try and pass that one off.
That's where that trigonometry class came in.
Yeah. I don't think God even asked me that stuff. I'd probably cheat off of him. But after narcotics, came back, I was a patrol sergeant, and that was probably the best gig in the department because you're not too high up in the ladder and you're not too far down. You can go to any call you want. That was fun. And then got promoted to lieutenant and oversaw investigations of the school resource officer program, active shooter response, and operations, kind of the whole gauntlet in law enforcement. But once you take that step from sergeant and above, you kind of stop being a cop. And I that's the one thing I regretted, was I did miss that. And I don't think I was ready to get out, but you can't pass up a promotional opportunity.
You can't. You got to think longevity. You got to think family and all that stuff. And
it probably saved my life too, to be honest, to get the hell off the road. It's a young man's game.
It is. It's hard to let go, but it is. It is a young man's game.
Even being retired for 3 months, I miss the code 3 runs, and I miss the constant make a decision now. It's like I've lived my life by the seat of my pants, and I enjoy that.
And that's why I love to have conversations with people that wore the badge, because you as much as the audience and those that weren't exposed to this will try to understand, there's just some things you can't understand until you sat in that seat. And when you talk about, when you miss it, there's nights here where I'm editing, I got the slider open, letting air come on, and you hear the code 3 running, and your instincts, like when you're in the report writing room, grab keys and run. Time to get out there. And it's having to accept that's not my mission no more. And that's hard.
It's very hard. In fact, the admin stuff, and this is from every agency across this country, it's literally a bunch of old women sitting around gossiping. And when there's downtime, it just gets ugly. And it's like, it's like babysitting first graders, and they're all cops, a lot of testosterone in one room is not always that fun.
Let me ask you this, Jason, because you went from the rank and file guys into the leadership. So I want to take advantage of this opportunity. When you were on the the pushing the black and white, as a patrol guy, and you're getting the the 30-day memos and all the stuff that rolls down, and you're just like, when I become that guy, when I'm the sergeant, when I'm the lieutenant, it's gonna be like this. How hard was it to to kind of stay true to what you always told yourself you would be in those positions, but also understanding what it's like being on that side of the rope now and how things had to be different. How do you manage that?
I was okay with it because I never changed who I was. And I always knew where I came from. And my heart was still, on the road, working undercover in the school. I mean, my heart was still doing the boots to the ground stuff. And I never lost that. And I always told myself, just always be yourself. And when you get to that level, your peers now become almost lobbying for that next rung on the ladder. They just want to keep climbing. The minute you recognize you don't want to go any higher is the minute you become yourself, and you don't have to be fake. And I was one of those lieutenants that as long as you were a cop and you were doing something in good faith, I would have your back. One of the hardest things I did was internal affairs. I hated that because these were my friends. I really struggled with that. But in the same breath, a couple of them I did, they fucked up. You dropped the ball here, dude. Fall on your sword, admit it, or you're fired. And even if you admit it, you still might be fired. But that's hard to do. And cops are people too. But to answer your question, I always I don't like people. I always said, if you want to know what a supervisor is going to be like, take their personality as a patrol officer and put it on steroids. So if you have a very anal partner that's just dot the I's, cross the T's, and you're doing 56 and a 50, one of those idiots, they're going to be a horrible boss to work for. So I don't sweat the small stuff and understand that they're all people, and cops will make mistakes too. And at the end of the day, it's about making them a better person. But you can do that by being their friend. And if I had to talk to somebody, I'd say, I got to be your lieutenant for a second. We'd get done with business and we'd move on with life. Yeah, and that's the way and also being blunt with them. Don't sugarcoat crap. Nobody likes to sit there and have a two-faced person tell you one thing and talk shit behind your back. I was always very, very candid, and they knew that about me.
That's a good thing, because a lot of the anxiety that comes from that profession is the unknown. Because if you have someone that's two-faced and they're like, oh, it's going to be this way, you're still walking away with anxiety, because you're like, well, that this person always says this but does that. If you're just cutthroat and said, hey, this is what it is and this is what it's going to look like, people know, all right, this is what I'm walking into, this is what it's going to be like. And you still got to deal with it, like you said, but at the same time, you're not creating that unneeded anxiety, which is the job has enough of it as it is.
Yeah, my biggest fear as a lieutenant and a sergeant was that stupid red light on my phone, because I knew that was a complaint or some stupid thing I got to deal with. And that red light that you have a message, hated it.
Ours was 1019 on the West Coast. I don't know if it was for you guys as well, but 1019 was return to station, right?
Yep, same here.
All right, so if you got that 1019 call, first thing everybody went is like, damn. It's never, they're not calling me to shake my hand and tell me something good, so the MDC starts going off. What'd you do? And
especially if it's coming from your supervisor. Like, I remember 4841 was my badge number. 4841 come 1019 and see 48S10. Like, oh fuck. What did I do? And then you're driving back just trying to reminisce all the bad shit you've done the last month.
You're going down the whole checklist of whoa. That was the good times. Let me ask you this as well. Was there ever, I'm sure there probably was one, but can you recall one where you're like, what the hell am I doing? Is this even worth it anymore?
Yeah. COVID time. I really struggled with, like, it appears the businesses were shutting down, and a couple businesses were literally, people lost their houses, and one gal reopened her business, and I didn't blame her. And we were ordered, to go shut her down. And like, I didn't go. I made myself busy. That was the moment that I thought, and even the hiring process, like, I was looking at people we were hiring based upon all but qualifications. That was the turning point for me, where mentally I'm ready to go, because it's going a direction that I don't agree with.
Man, I was done before that happened. Like literally right before all that kicked off
You're lucky.
is when I missed it. Because it's easy to say I would have handled it like this and handled it like that, but when you're actually presented with it, and people are like, especially the longer you are into your career, you're looking at, your retirement,
Yeah.
promotion, there's a
You
lot
get
on
the
the table.
gold. You get the golden handcuffs, where you're trapped. Because if I make it 3 more years, my monthly pension is going to be, X amount of dollars more than if I leave now. So we call it the golden handcuffs. You're trapped.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I want to shift this now. I want to focus. So you were SRO. For those that don't know what SRO is, school resource officer. You mostly see them in high school, but sometimes you see them into middle schools. I'm not aware of any elementary schools that have them yet, but predominantly high school. And every once in a while, if you have a good budget in a city with money, you'll see it in a middle school. And we kind of talked before we started to record the show. Working gangs, I used to go and communicate with a lot of the SROs because the gang activity in the schools. And when I went into these schools, there was SROs that were just shit hot, man. Like these dudes were dialed in. And then there were some that I was like, I'm glad my kids don't go to this school. If the shit hit the fan at this school, this is not what you want. And I want to address this to the public just so people are aware. And I'm not saying that this is all of them, because obviously Jason was an SRO, he's shit hot, knows how to do his job. But people have to understand that a lot of agencies sometimes send the person that nobody wants on patrol or any of these other assignments, they send them to the high school as the SRO, or they'll send the motherly figure that's over there. And this is where our most precious cargo is at. And something that we've seen a definitive rise in over the last couple of decades, and more recently in the last couple of years, are these school shootings. What's your experience with the SRO, given the fact that you were one?
You got to have the right person in there. You really do, and you need the best of the best, because the job is so diverse. The number of hats you wear in that role can go from counselor to teacher to big brother to tactical response, literally in the same day. And if you have the wrong mentality in there, you can take anybody out of patrol and put stripes on them and call them a sergeant. You can't take every patrol officer and put them into a school. And it should be the best of the best, because you are literally the sheriff of a town of 2,500 people going through puberty. I mean, the emotions, the rational thought process of their brains aren't developed yet. It was probably the busiest job of my career, to be honest. I would go. There was times where there would be a big fight, and one kid had a knife, and I would have like 5 kids in different rooms and going to interview to interview to interview to interview. That was kind of a typical day. And the other thing too, you brought up about getting an information. If you do the job right and you develop relationships with these kids and they respect you, they'll tell you anything. I had numerous kids come up to me and say, "Hey, I got some intel on some coke," and I would, cool, and I'd send it off to the drug task force, and 9 times out of 10 they'd follow up on it. And I was very passionate about it, because these are kids. They're dealing to kids, and that was like, I don't give a shit if you want to sell crack to a crackhead, go ahead. But if you're taking one of these innocent people and you're turning them into dope, you're a piece of shit. To give the kids a chance, stay out of their life. But it takes a very special cop to do that job. And within law enforcement, you're kind of viewed as a soft position, and I would argue it is just the opposite of that. It's the same role. You're responding to stuff throughout the day. It's just in one location with children, like teenage children.
Did you know? I'm curious if I don't know what your thought process was or what your childhood was like, but I noticed there's a lot of cops that maybe didn't experience things in their childhood. So when they see a young kid make a mistake, maybe there's not some empathy or compassion that's there, just because they were like, no, you just don't do that. That's what we're taught. Maybe they didn't make a lot of mistakes growing up. Did you ever find yourself already having that opinion, or did you kind of find yourself maturing into that understanding through your career, where you came across, especially as an SRO, you get to hear these kids' stories, maybe there's no dad, or maybe there's no mom, or maybe maybe it's grandparents. Sometimes these kids are just raising themselves and their siblings. Did your opinion of, these kids that, we call them, the muskrats, like the troublemakers, or, the mini shit bags.
Mhm.
Did you find yourself kind of developing where you're still going to hold them accountable? There's still going to be consequence, but your opinion kind of shift of what their life was like?
Yes. That actually happened in patrol. I started pretty young. I don't think I would have hired me when I started, looking back, if that means anything. But overall, law enforcement teaches you that life is all about evolution, and it's not about, I am not the same person I was when I was 21, not even close to that person. And when these kids would come up and you learn that mom and dad are going through divorce, dad's a alcoholic, mom's a heroin addict, and a 16-year-old kid has nothing in his life, and he turns to drugs. One thing that I think the kids respected about me was if they came up and told me something, they knew if it was illegal, I would have to act on it. But they also knew that they could come up and I'm going to give them an honest answer. And I had no problem with a kid coming up saying, hey, I screwed up this weekend, and telling me the story and saying, why the fuck did you think that was the right thing to do? Kids don't have that in their life anymore. They're not being called out, but you can do it with a caring mind behind it. You don't have to demean them, but you can also let them know that you're going to end up in prison, dude. I don't want to see you go there. You keep fucking up like this, I'll personally put you there. You're disappointing me. And I think teenagers, it's not like they've never heard the F-bomb before, but when you talk to them at that level, they kind of understand and listen more, because you almost bring yourself to their level and have that style of communication, versus if you're a chemistry teacher talking about E equals MC squared shit. But when you're talking to a kid and you're at a position of authority, they respect the fact you can talk to them like they talk, but also know that I will drag you by your ear out of this building if you cross me. So the kids respected that.
And they did. And I'm glad to hear that too. I had a very similar approach, whether it was on the street or whatever the scenario was, show them, because a lot of these kids don't have a father or an older brother. Right. So you show them that, but you also let them know, if you do what I'm telling you not to do, I'm going to throw the book at you. When it comes down to that and you make the choice, I'm not going to have mercy. It is my job to defend this community. And if you want to be on that other side, but you let them know, like, here's the reality of that. Yep. And to get into realities now, I want to take us into, this 3D response system and active shooter. You were active shooter response instructor. Yep. And, in that title is response. Yep. And people forget this, where law enforcement is responding to an active shooter scenario. It's going to be very rare where we're in a position, to where it immediately kicks off. And, it doesn't matter how motivated your cops are, if they're rolling code and if they get the call of an active shooter at a school, trust me, that's the fastest they're probably ever going to drive in their career. Also the most dangerous probably they're ever going to drive in their career to get to that scene, but it still is going to take minutes. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we've seen videos that have been leaked on what happens in those minutes. And in those minutes, kids are being killed or severely injured. Let me start the conversation with this, Jason. Do parents or even the community truly understand how dangerous the reality of an active shooter at a school is?
No. They have the whole concept of it is a misconception, and I posted a video a while back, and I knew it was gonna maybe offend some people, but it was actually body cam footage from Parkland where it showed the blood and it showed, you can hear the gunshots, and it was real. And I think, even anybody in your audience with law enforcement or military experience, if you've ever been involved in it, there's so much more that goes into any of these responses than just thinking of even if you have a gun in the school. Look at Parkland, there was a gun on campus. You didn't know how that good gun would respond in that moment, and he failed. Look at Uvalde, a whole bunch of cops failed. So even if a good gun's on campus, you still are responding. And even if if I was a school cop, there could be 100 shots going off in that building and I wouldn't know. I mean, it's not like I can hear the entire building. I'm still responding to it. So you have that window of complete mass chaos where the kids and the teachers have no response whatsoever, than to do probably the most ineffective response known to man other than duck and cover, which is run, hide, fight. Run, hide, fight is not going to stop a bullet. So when you're in that moment, you need to keep it simple and you need to have a plan, and you don't know how the teachers are going to respond. You don't know if they get there in time, whether it's a cop or it's an armed security guard or a teacher has a gun, whatever, I don't care. The good gun's not going to be where the bad gun is when it needs to be there, period. So yes, it's a response regardless of what or who is responding. There's still that gap that kids are extremely vulnerable. And one thing for your audience to know that isn't in law enforcement, but when I was training force on force, you ever do simulations training? I'm sure you have. You'd get shot intentionally. When I was instructing, if somebody's exposing a piece of their body, I'm shooting it so they can have that pain compliance. Like, you're exposing yourself, get your ass behind cover. Well, the instructor that instructed me said from the National Tactical Officers Association, if you're involved in a shooting and you have cover, your chance of survival is 85%. If you don't have cover, your chance of survival dips down to 17%. That's how important having that response is right in that moment. And the general public doesn't see how fast it can happen and how fast it can end and how many casualties can happen literally within 45 seconds.
It's scary because some of the videos that we have seen, I mean, these are kids. Kids shouldn't have to think about this, but the world has changed, unfortunately. And if you're a parent, and you can disagree or agree with me on this, Jason, this is just my opinion. But if you're a parent and you've never had this conversation with your kid of the potential of an active shooter situation in their school, then the likelihood of their response, if it ever was to happen to them, is going to be shock and confusion.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I know this? Because a lot of the videos that I've seen, whether they were leaked or formally released, what do you see a lot of these kids do? They're shocked and they're frozen. And everybody's that's watching it screaming, run, hide, do something. And they're shocked and they're frozen. Or they're looking towards a teacher for direction who's shocked and frozen. And we see these kids that when these shooters finally do come into their rooms or the cafeteria or wherever it is, they're relying on mercy. And we see that the end of their life is them begging for it. And it breaks my heart, man. It just really hurts my heart that we see this innocence. So it's literally begging for their life from someone that's just doesn't. And they die that way. And we're all looking at a window that was, 12 feet away or a door to another room or something. And that's why these conversations are important. And you're talking about having this cover. Before we get into the cover, are we truly aware of how often active shooters even happen, or are these numbers being misrepresented, whether inflated or underreported? What is the reality of it?
I can speak just from personal experience, and I won't go from a national average, but I was either an SRO or oversaw the SRO program for 20 years. I've been involved in either actively investigating or overseeing over 60 active shooter threats to just this district that I'm in. That's averaged out to about 5 or 6 active shooter threats a year. 1 year, and that's where people don't know, is how often these occur. Some of them make public knowledge of it because it leaks, but most schools don't want you to know this. And I always see the press release from a school district that says, we put your kids' safety our number one priority. I say, bullshit. That's just a talking point that all you educators have been saying for 20 years. You haven't done shit to fix this, so please, let's stop lying. at the end of one school year, I was overseeing it, and I had 3 SROs that I supervised. They did a phenomenal job that year. I think they had 6 active shooter threats. 2 of them were bomb threats, and they spent hours and hours on each of these, and they got the suspect in custody and kept the school safe. At the end of the year, I said, guys, I want you to write a year-end report, because I was proud of them and the work they did, and I want to submit it to the superintendent to just show one of the aspects of an SRO. And the superintendent called me after I emailed it to her, and she said, we can't put this in our newsletter. And I said, why not? Well, we'll scare the parents. I said, well, you don't think the parents deserve to know that this shit's going on in your district? And they wouldn't do it. So I think the threats are way more prevalent, at least in my district and across this state, that I hear about, than the general public realizes how often these threats come in.
So what was it then that kind of sparked you to come up with 3D response system? You know, how did it start?
It's kind of a happenstance story. This was probably 2012-ish. It was right 2010. It was right after Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook was one for me that kind of, seeing dead elementary school kids, that one was like, okay, nobody's doing anything about this. And at the time, I'm teaching run, hide, fight, but in the back of my mind, I know that run, hide, fight is just a cooler way of saying fight or flee. It's a natural, what you're going to freeze or you're going to run. So there's no real scientific value to run, hide, fight at all. I'm putting together a presentation for the entire staff. There's like 2,000 teachers and custodians of this district. And my younger boy walks in and says, Dad, what are you doing? And at the time, I think he was in 6th or 7th grade. And I told him I have to teach your teachers on an active shooter. And being a cop's son, they both know what all that stuff means. But I told him, I want you to run as fast as you can. And both my boys played football and lacrosse. I said, if somebody gets in your way, I want you to plow them over. Just run. I don't care where you go. I want you to run. And don't stop until you get to a house and pound that door and ask for help. And the next day, I'm training the teachers the direct opposite of what I told my son.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in here real quick, Jason, just so the audience knows. Because my shows are never scripted. We have a general idea of where it's going to go. But before the show started, me and Jason were having this conversation. I told him, my older girls are all adults now, but when they were first in high school, and I had this conversation with my 2 oldest daughters, and it was the same thing that Jason told you. Is I told my little girls, you run to this back field, the soccer field. They knew that we're going towards the football fields. You run, you jump that wall into the homes over there. And you pound on those doors and you tell them to call the police. And then the other direction I told them as I go, and you don't look for each other to run. I go, you just trust that you love each other both enough that you're going to follow these instructions and you're going to trust each other, that you're both just going to, wherever you're at, whether it's recess, the cafeteria, the locker room, you're going to run. And I felt awful trying to tell them that this is the only way to increase their likelihood of survival. But it was just because I knew what you knew. Mm-hmm. That the chances of the person that needs to be there to stop the threat is just not going to be there in time. And I wasn't willing to weigh my children's life on it. So I told them to run.
Yes.
And I wanted to share that so people understand that you have 2 cops that are telling you this is what they told their kids to do because something didn't exist to provide a different option. And I'll give it back to you, Jason.
And that was the birth of the idea. I've always been a take the bull by the horn type guy. And there's this massive problem that's been, active shooters have been around since the late 1700s. It really started uptick in the 1970s and now it's become commonplace almost, which is horrific. But nobody's done anything about it. And I was like, you know what? I called my business partner now, who's a former SWAT guy. We worked undercover narcotics together. One of my best friends, very tactical dude. Let's put run, hide, fight on steroids. The building doesn't support the concept. So how can we take the infrastructure of a building and make hide work? And we just started brainstorming from a tactical lens on, and what if the shit out of it. I mean, to the point of we take, you know, police response into consideration, and barricaded suspect with hostages, and you take this away from the suspect, you're also taking this away from the cops and their response. And it was a marriage of all the tactics that went into it, and each building that we were looking at was unique unto itself. And on top of that, we didn't want the schools to look like a prison, so we had to make it very not noticeable. And that was literally the start of it. Was, I'm done seeing kids dead, and we're not giving them the resources, or the teachers the resources, to respond from a tactical point of view. And what would I need as a police officer in that moment? If I'm confronted with a gun, what's going to keep me alive? And we just weren't giving it to them. They have no tools.
And so what's the first concept? What'd you guys end up creating?
Oh boy, we went through a lot of shit that the fire marshal says you can't do that. I mean, we started with, I want to fucking pepper spray everybody to, you know, just like, it was an evolution of what we could and couldn't do. And it took about 4 years to actually come up with our final system. And then we got it patented, and fire marshal signed off on it. And anyway, we took a 10,000 foot view of what we just did. We didn't mean to do this. It was literally, we just created the fire suppression system for a gun. That's literally what we did. And if you look at what a fire suppression system actually is, it's a multi-layered system that gets the fire department there faster, provides the tools for the people inside, and it's a keep it simple, stupid response because you're under stress. And we did the same thing, just for a different threat. So all the tools that you think about during a gunfight, much like all the tools you would need during a firefight, it just kind of meshed together with the same philosophy. And we didn't mean to do that. It just happened. And I got researching the fire code, and interestingly, it was written in the 1900s, and it wasn't implemented until 1958, when 95 kids died in the fire in Chicago, Our Lady of the Angel School. It took almost 100 kids to die for them finally to say, we're going to enforce this fire code. So then buildings had to have it because it was law. Since that fire in Chicago, not one life has been lost to a fire in our nation in a school. I'm like, that's impressive shit. That they went from the leading cause of death to nothing. So there's something there. And I think we're not looking at it from a tactical lens. We're asking educators and politicians, what should we do? And they have no background in any of that shit. But that's their job. And I was talking to a superintendent, former lieutenant colonel in the Army of 20 years. He actually brought us into his 17 schools because he saw the system in a private school, and he said, this will work. But again, he had that military background where he's looked at the school we're installed in from a tactical lens. And I was talking to him, and he goes, do you know, if the fire code wasn't existent, 99% of our superintendents would take their chances it wouldn't happen here. And he goes, Jace, how many safety and security classes do you think I took for my education doctorate degree or undergrad? I go, I don't know, 5. He goes, 0. It's not even a prerequisite. Yep, those are the people that are dictating what is going to keep your kids alive.
That's insane. That's
the truth.
I mean, I would have figured they were at least getting a yearly course, like a yearly review or something.
No,
0. That's
well, run, hide, fight.
Oh, there's that, yeah. So, and it's you're playing roulette with that one. Then that's the scary part of it. Yeah. So give us kind of like a paint the picture. How does this system work? Like as much as you can disclose without burning your product.
Most of it's on the website, so I'm not really afraid of burning the product. Again, it's the whole concept of, you're a teacher in your classroom, or you're a teacher and you have lunch duty, you take your kids out to the playground, you go through all these scenarios that happen during a school day, and you look at cover, concealment, and communication for all events you can come up with. You can't just focus on the vestibule. You can't just focus on the back door because you can't predict where the gun is going to present itself. You know, you can get metal detectors and artificial intelligence, and we don't have those in our system. And the reason is all that is an alert system, and it may not alert. It does not answer now what. So it's one thing to like visually see a gun. It's another thing to visually see that gun. And like you and I as police officers, if we were working, that guy's got a gun, he just brandished it. That's a danger to everybody in here. I have a response to that. I have a weapon. I have a ballistic vest. I have cover. You know, we had a plan. So with our system, go to the classroom, we would take and we'd look in the classroom. We would look at angles from the entry point, which is the door. And we would basically put ballistic protection that you can't see somewhere in that classroom to provide enough cover from the hallway, any space that would protect all the children with level 7, which will stop up to a 223 or a 556. So you provided cover. If there's windows there, we're going to address the windows in some fashion. Each room is different. We're going to add 1,200 pounds of magnetic pressure to that door that's set off with a push of a button. We're going to put an alert system both in and outside of that classroom and throughout the building. At the same time, we're going to set up a command center in that building. So in the admin office, the entire admin can go into a completely ballistic bunker and they can start to dispatch to their staff. Because here's one thing that a lot of teachers says, we don't know. How do we know it's the bad guy at the door? How do we know it's the cops at our door? How do we know what's going on? And these teachers are literally sitting in the dark after putting a bunch of chairs against their doors and praying that he doesn't come to this door. Well, now with our system, they're going to start to hear Mrs. Anderson, the intruder, is wearing a white shirt, black hat, blue jeans. He got a long gun. He's walking up to your door now. And then if he's now walking this way. And so that play-by-play is going out over the loudspeaker. As soon as that first officer gets there, they're going to turn their attention to the cop and they're going to say, "Officer, we see you, come through the front door. When you get through the front door, I want you to take a right. Go down that long hallway. The intruder is going to be on your left by room 202. And we would run cops through our system without our system. And in an elementary school, it was over 5 minutes for the officer to locate the suspect. And with our system, it was around 40 seconds.
Wow.
It was like Google Map. And every cop, every military person, the FBI active shooter response team came through it. They've all walked out going, this is a game changer. And not only that, the ballistics we put in, it increases the cop's survival on room entry because now you have this body bunker that's installed, that's pulled out, and you can clear a room behind cover versus walking in butt naked and taking 2 rounds before you get your shot off. So back to the teachers, when a teacher hits their button, so they hear a shot or whatever, or the alert goes off. They go, they check their hallway, they pull in any stragglers, they close their door, hit their button. That button activates the 1,200 pounds of magnetic pressure on the door. It sets off the alert system inside and outside the school, and it immediately sends a text message to 911 that says police needed, room 102, St. John's Elementary School. And then the next teacher and the next teacher. And dispatch will see where it started. It will also see that the whole school is in lockdown. Meanwhile, now the teachers have cover and concealment. There's internal communication going on. And it's all within, we can take a school of 2,200 kids, and in 60 seconds, you had a target-rich environment, and you make it target-less. We want to walk into empty hallways. We want to walk into isolating the suspect who has nobody to hurt because he ain't getting through those doors. I mean, we've done explosive breaches on our doors. I can send you videos of that sometime if you want to see them. But explosive breach ain't opening that door. Those kids are safe. So you put our system in Uvalde. It was 2 minutes between the first 911 call and his entry into the back door. 60 seconds, that room is shut, that school shut down. He goes to that first classroom rather than getting in. 1,200 pounds of magnetic pressure. Kids are behind level 7 ballistic protection. Cops are on the way and being dispatched to the location. Even if the cops stay in the hallway, you're still not getting in that classroom. And that's the whole thrust of it, is cover, concealment, communication. A very custom design to a particular building to ensure that the children and the teachers have a response that is simple. and effective.
That is one, that time frame, the difference, 5 minutes to 40 seconds. I mean,
I got a side-by-side video I can send you too sometime.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have the video from your website. I don't know if you ever want me to show that, I can show that. If not, I can show it at the end of the show. Let me ask you this: what, because we know a lot of the schools, they have these big pane windows and stuff like that for the classrooms on the on the interior side. Is there a way to, how do you provide? I know you said there's like ballistics you put in the class if he's shooting through them. But if he decides to make entry through a window that he shoots through or something, I mean, I know you can't protect from everything, but how does this kind of address that? Or
we have a lot of windows in the schools we're installed in that are basically covered by barn doors, and the barn doors are ballistic. So it's like a 4x8, two of them, and they're on a rail system. And it's actually laminated with a whiteboard. So the teachers actually use our ballistic protection as their chalkboard every day.
Wow.
But they can cover the window, and all of a sudden the window becomes level 7 fortified.
That is awesome.
We have a lot of,
and it shows that you guys really did what if this.
Oh yeah. We look at it, if we can defeat it, let's fix it. Because thankfully we haven't had any real intelligent active shooters yet. And my biggest fear is we have somebody who is tactically trained and we're going to see a slaughter. I mean, because right now we've been fortunate that these kids are dumber than a box of rocks. And, right now the way it is they own that building until they decide it's over. We need to take that back. Take your school back. No, not your school today, asshole. It's my school. Good luck getting in here.
What has been some of the pushback that you've gone, if any, on you guys deploying these programs in schools, and how have you guys addressed that? And have school districts become more receptive to this, kind of the point where you're not really having to sell it no more? It's more where they're reaching out saying, "Hey, we've heard about this and we want this."
They are now, but I can tell you, I've labeled it this invisible wall. And I thought for sure after we got in the first large district of all their schools that it was going to domino, because, you can't have a neighboring school not have what this school has and say that you're safe. And the threshold to liability is, did you do everything you could to prevent loss of life? And you're not going to answer yes to that with like the fire code and you don't put the fire code in. No, you didn't. The biggest hurdle, this invisible wall I've seen, and this ties, I would say it's politics. It's political, and I'm learning why. There's a bill in Minnesota called the SHIELD Act, and Representative Engen came down and toured one of the schools we're in, and he wasn't too far removed from school himself. He's young, like 26 or so, smart dude. We're walking out and he looks at me and he goes, "Why in the hell isn't this every goddamn school in this country? Because why aren't you guys all over the place?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Jesus," and kudos to him. He took the bull by the horn and wrote a bill on it that he wanted this in every school, public and private, in Minnesota. He wanted a letter from like Moms Demand Action. I said, okay. So I reached out to a local chapter and I had two of these people come down. I gave them a tour. Same response. Why isn't this in every school? I said, can you do me a favor and write a letter of endorsement for the SHIELD Act on Moms Demand Action letterhead? I give it to Elliot. Elliot brings it over to the Democrats and they said, how the F did you get this letter? That's our group. And Elliot said, what? He gets a phone call 20 minutes later from the national president of Moms Demand Action saying, we retract this letter. And Elliot said, why? So we're neutral on this topic. We retract the letter. And then Elliot goes, so let me get this straight. Moms Demand Action, who is this national organization proclaiming to protect our children, is neutral on the topic of protecting our children. Fast forward. Turns out they're an NGO. They get a shit ton of money after there's dead kids. And I'm figuring out their whole thrust is to go after guns. And people, it's like you don't want to fix a problem because it's profitable or it's a conversation point for your next election cycle. And I just think our kids have become pawns, and it's disgusting what I've learned in the political realm of things. And it infuriates me that people's agendas are more important than our children's lives.
It's heartbreaking. How do parents take this into their hands if, let's say, they're in a situation where, you know, they got a place where it's very political and they're pushing back against the systems? What can parents do to apply the pressure to make the system be instituted in their schools?
It's got to be, I've learned it's got to be grassroots. You know, we started this just a couple cops with sick of seeing dead kids. And it was a grassroots thing from parents, cops, firefighters, you know, medics, educators. We just all got together and came up with it. Parents, first and foremost, need to educate themselves, because I guarantee you they're going to go to a school board meeting or they're going to ask their principal, what are you doing to keep my kids safe? And they're going to give you a line of bullshit. They're going to say, we have security cameras, or we have metal detectors, or we're getting this really cool technology, this artificial intelligence shit. Challenge them on that stuff and ask them, okay, what are your cameras going to do to stop a bullet? Or, you know, it's great to solve a theft, but not so good at keeping my kids safe. And what's your metal detector going to do to stop a bullet? You might recognize a gun, but you're not stopping the bullet. And at that point, it's too late. Gun's already there. So what effectiveness is that system? You know, challenge them on their definition of safety. We in society have defined everything else. Fire safety, there's laws for it. Car safety, there's laws for it. Workplace safety, OSHA. Fucking swimming pool safety, there's policies. Every single thing in our country has been defined to keep us as safe as possible, except for this topic. That's why you go from district to district, county to county, state to state, and you see 150 definitions of school safety. And not one of them focuses on the stakeholders, which are the kids, the teachers, and the cops. They all focus on, it sounds cool, or just a low-hanging fruit that a superintendent and school board can go to their squeaky wheel parents and say, we're getting a phone app to keep your kids safe, to make the squeaky go away. It's educate yourself and challenge them on just, what is your definition of safety? And is your definition going to actually stop a bullet? If they answer no, then it's not safety.
What is, when you finally do get a school that accepts this system, you know, what's the, you know, and I know this is going to be based on budgets and things like that, but realistic time frame, how quick can a school implement this? Is it going to take a couple years? Can they do it?
No. The first private school we did was done in 3 months. The district we did, it was right at the middle to tail end of COVID, so that delayed things, but that was 17 schools. It took about 18 months, 2 years to do all 17 schools. But we've partnered with some nationwide construction companies and architects that we can up that process pretty quickly. The slow part would be the designs.
Man, so there's a program that's this close, and it red tape, paper, and just even people even knowing about it. You said that now they're starting to see the calls for the demands of, hey, I'd like to have this program in my school. Is it because they're hearing it from other people, or is it because these are adjacent schools, you know, school districts? You know, how are they now starting to find out about you guys and coming to you guys?
The sad truth was the shooting in the Minneapolis Catholic school about a month ago. That was when, unfortunately, we as a nation only talk about this when there's dead kids, and then it just kind of goes away. After that, I've given tours to about 16 state senators and state reps. There was 3 senators that testified last week that said, you know, I went down and saw the Lakeville schools, and I went there as a skeptic. I'm not a skeptic anymore. This system should be in every school in this state, public and private. I posted his comment, but it takes dead children for us to get passionate about it. And I was doing an interview with a radio show, and the guy asked, he was just passionate about it. Like, we got to stop this. And he was just passionate. And I said, were you this passionate on July 1st this summer? And he said, what happened? I said, nothing. Why do people respond? We should be doing this when there's no, we need to be proactive, get in front of it. Let's stop being reactive. I wrote an article called Wash, Rinse, Repeat, probably back in 2017. And it was just an observation that I saw from all these shootings where you have an incident, you have back then 2 or 3, maybe 4 days of grieving. And then you have this passionate call to action, but nobody knows what the action is. And people throw stuff against the wall. And then you have going on 25 years now of gun control. And the reason our kids keep getting hurt is because the adults that are in decision-making positions continue this argument. We can do something now. If you guys want to fight about guns and mental health for the next 30 years, have at it. But in the meantime, can you please protect our kids?
It's crazy. I was listening to you earlier when you were kind of talking about all these different things that have safety, features, OSHA and all this. And I don't know why, but it just came to my head just thinking about vehicles. Vehicles, the technology ramped up. So we put seatbelts.
Yep.
And seatbelts wasn't enough. So then we put airbags. But then airbags wasn't enough because, glass would shatter. So then we changed the way, glass was. And then we changed,
lane sensors.
Yeah, all this stuff, like billions of dollars into the automotive industry to make sure that these vehicles that we drive in on the daily are safe. But yet our kids go to school daily, even through summer vacation, all this. Why isn't that investment there? We do, and I'm not saying that we don't need to have safe vehicles. That's not the point I'm trying to make. Is look at that. What is everybody ask yourself right now? Where does my kid spend more time, in a vehicle or at school? And chances are the answer to that's going to be at school. So why doesn't this equal attention and investment there? And you've answered it. The politics is there, and the nefarious intent to utilize these casualties and these incidents. It's awful. As we wrap this up, Jason, let me ask you this, because it's a very actionable audience that's watching the show tonight. What is the stuff that they can do to help facilitate your mission to get this out to schools? And I know you said it needs to be grassroots and organic, and there's a lot of, we have Badlands groups set throughout the entire country. But what is something that they can do, like as soon as this show's over and they're just like, this is unacceptable, this needs to be, what's something that they can do right now at the conclusion of this show to help you get this everywhere?
So if you go to our website, 3dresponse.com, there on the top there's a printable PDF, and that you can print that PDF off, bring it to your school board meeting, bring it to your state legislator. Just ask them to read that and tell them you'd like to have a follow-up conversation about it. And basically that's our background and what the system is. You can print that off, use it as you want. But this goes back to part of be the educator to the educators. Go to your school board and say, have you heard of this system? And if you haven't, please read this and why. And when you're done reading it, I want to talk about keeping my kids safe. I think that's the most nut and bolt way that they can start the conversation. Give it to your friends. Tell them to read it. The more parents that start to speak up, I revert back when Black Lives Matter in Minnesota overran our school boards, and they were showing up strapping and just causing a whole bunch of ruckus. They were loud. They were very loud, and they got their way on some stuff. And now that way is getting some school districts sued. My question to the parents is, where's that passion with keeping our kids safe? Why aren't we as passionate as they were when they were arguing about a certain poster that can be allowed in school, or the whole LGBTQ RSTUV movement that was going on. They were loud. Where's the loudness for keeping our kids alive? Why aren't we, as normal, rational, God-fearing people, not speaking up for our children, but speaking up from an educated point of view? Because it's really hard to argue with somebody that's being factual and not opinionated. Opinions are really easy to overcome if you know your shit.
Absolutely agree. Let me ask you one more question. There are people in our audience that the Lord has blessed them financially, and for those people that are like, okay, I'll do this letter and I'll do that part, if there's people that want to financially help you, how do they get a hold of you to help you with that?
Actually, funny you bring that up. We're working with a Catholic school right now who wants to install us, and basically it's going to be funded by one of their parents who's financially gifted, and they're very passionate about their children being safe. So if you do have those types of funds, your local private school, if your grandkids go to a school, it's not as expensive as people think it is. It's an artificial football field, just the turf is going to cost you about $5 million. We could do 3-4 schools for that amount. So it's not as expensive as people think it is. It's less than a fire suppression system. So go to your private school or your kid's school and say, I'm willing to fund this. Let's do this.
There you have it, folks. I'll tell you what, man. I want to get with you offline and talk, because I know California is not going to make it easy.
No, they're about as bad as Minnesota. If we can make it in Minnesota, we can make it anywhere. There's a song about that, I think, but it's a different state. But Minnesota's a mess.
Yeah. We owe it to our kids to be relentless in the pursuit of making this happen. Like you said, there's a fire system in every single school because of a threat that happened way back when that cost the lives of 100 kids. We don't have to continue to watch kids die at school. This is an answer. This is not a theory. This is not a let's hope. This is a real answer that's already been deployed in schools, that has a real team with contractors and everybody that's ready to do it. We just need schools to say, let's make it happen. Let's figure out how it needs to be designed here, and let's not make it a what if we would have had it situation, because that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a school where somebody talked about this, or they rejected it, or somebody was like, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, and it's going to be too late. And you don't want that to be your school. You don't want that to be your kid's school. I still have some little ones that need to make it way through their school, and I want these systems in place before they ever get to that first door of school. So you guys keep Jason in your prayers. Stick around. I got a video that I'm going to play from Jason's website. We're going to get to a couple of commercials before we do that. And again, the website's for Jason and the sponsor of the shoot down in the description below. So we'll be back in just a second. They say confidence starts with a smooth skin. And baby, Soft Disclosure Lotion delivers.
I swear by this stuff. Like, I kid you guys not. This is the first lotion I've ever had in my entire life that, like, I don't get ashy after I put it on any part of my body. Like, my hands are always dry, and my hands have not gotten ashy without, like, rinsing them through water and washing them with soap since I started putting Soft Disclosure on. Like, it is Black Man approved. I kid you not.
Black Man approved. You heard him. And let's be real. If it can handle his hands, it can handle anything.
Feet are like, they get so dry, like the heels of them, it'll just kind of like flake off. Like, but with Soft Disclosure, once you put it on, like it starts to absorb it.
Yeah, he went there. Don't worry, we won't show you his feet, but trust us, they're smoother too. Soft Disclosure Lotion is made with aloe, goat's milk, honey, and our exclusive oil blend that actually restores your skin barrier. Visit softdisclosure.com, use code BADLANDS, and get 15% off. Soft Disclosure, folks. Code BADLANDS, get that discount. That voice sounded really familiar. I don't know. Maybe it's just a thing. You guys, Jason, 3D response systems, we got to get that in every school. And I know there's some of you that are always like, what can I do? How can I be involved? What kind of difference can I make? I want to get involved in the fight. This is our most precious. you know, and you don't have to be a parent. I think we all love the kids. I think we all understand the obligation that we have to protect these kids. You know, society's not getting better just yet. And that's going to take years to fix. And in the meantime, we shouldn't be playing roulette with our kids, you guys. So go visit the website, links down in the description, and we can do that. So one last promotion, and then I'm going to play the video from Jason's website. And then after that, it's going to be Devolution Power Hour for you guys. And I'll see you guys there in the chat. So Cocoa Beach Cart number 10, folks. Can you believe that? Number 10. You want to go, you want to have some fun. If you've never been to one, Cocoa Beach, Florida. I mean, why not start there? November 6th to the 9th, maybe a few days before and a few days after, for those of you that want to extend your vacation and meet new friends. Badlandsmedia.tv/events. So you can snag the lowest prices you can get on the tickets. Again, with the virtual tickets, if you know you can't make it in person, then get the virtual ticket right now and get it at a discounted price. You definitely want that. You want to get the special shows before the event. And again, badlandsmedia.tv/events, GART number 10. I've never been to Florida, so I'm looking forward to being out there in Florida. See if it's everything my coworkers keep telling me it is. So with that, you guys, God bless. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and share this out. You know, go follow Jason on social media. Go talk to your schools. Put the pressure on them. We need to make this happen. And so here is the video. Run, hide, fight.
School should be a safe place.
That statement seems like a no-brainer, right? But the fact is, school districts have to be proactive about it.
So you're going to need to sign in, and here's a pass.
Maybe even try a new approach.
We are first and foremost focused on how do we have a layered approach to safety and security.
Lakeville Area Schools has made this a priority, from Superintendent Michael Bauman to the school board to the public. In 2019, they passed a levy and bond referendum that helped add an additional school resource officer to the middle schools. They set up an anonymous reporting system and added a psychologist to handle threat assessments.
We know that the kids that have been active shooters have had struggles, and at some point, you know, maybe if someone would have intervened in a different way, maybe we could have headed that off. And I do feel in our district that we've had numerous situations over the last few years that we have made an impact on kids.
Reality is, not all threats get caught in time. So Lakeville went one step further.
When we came up with the system, we wanted to answer all those what-if questions.
They partnered with Minnesota-based 3D Response Systems.
We understand that the prevention is the most important piece, and to develop those relationships with the people in your building is the most important thing you can do. Now, if one slips through the cracks, which in a population like this school of 1,500 kids, but it's very possible, then our system comes into play to keep as many people safe as we possibly can.
3D Response Systems is a multi-layered design to get the police there faster and provide tools for the people inside to survive. The company was started by police, firefighters, educators, and parents. It takes the active shooter training, run, hide, fight, and adds 3 things they say makes it more effective: cover, concealment, and communication.
Cover is something that's going to protect you from like a bullet. Concealment is something that I can't see you. Communication is having constant active communication to keep you in the know.
Almost all of it is out of sight, so you don't lose the feeling of a teaching space. The only visible signs are the police buttons on the wall in every room, in every building.
You simply push a button, and when you push that button, you've sent a text message to dispatch that says, police needed to room 102, Lakeville North High School. And each room, when they hit their button, a new text message will be sent. It also activates 1,200 pounds of magnetic pressure on your door, so you get a nice tight seal and you're not going to get through that door. And then lastly, it sets off the alert system both inside and outside the school.
Hidden ballistic panels can be pulled out of the walls if needed, and cameras help the officers responding get to where the threat is faster.
That's part of the communication piece that comes in, so the teachers know exactly where the intruder is. When the first officer arrives, they can talk to the officer and say he's on the 3rd floor by room 302.
Lakeville has installed the system in both high schools and is working its way through every school in the district. A system they hope they never have to use. But having it is peace of mind, because just hoping it never happens isn't a solution.
We're fully aware that you can't stop the first one. I mean, it's a reactive situation, but you can stop the next 5.
Rena Sargentopoulos, KARE 11 News.
Well, Lakeville is the first public school district in the country to use this Minnesota-based safety system. It is already in place at Christian Heritage Academy, a private school also based in Lakeville.